3,000. Big. 31 target north, boom stack 36,000, 13,000. Bang. 40 scope, short skate, hot, right.
This is the Be One Change One podcast, where our mission is to help listeners define values, practice integrity, and inspire change.
Our vision is to mentor men and empower them to achieve more by taking responsibility for shaping their own lives.
He's CAS, an evolving man who has been shaped by adversity and continues to grow through his imperfections.
And he's Roscoe, an imperfect work in progress that tries to suck less every day.
Between us, we have over 40 years of Air Force fighter pilot experience with countless hours as trainers, instructors, and mentors.
Join us and learn to take responsibility for your own life as we dive into subjects from leadership to resilience to vulnerability.
Be the one who changes their course. Be decisive, driven, and purposeful. Set the example for others. Lead. We wish we'd had this show when we were younger men.
Be the one.
If you couldn't tell, I went ahead and started already.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah. Sometimes the most authentic shit is when you catch us when we're in these moods.
Yeah, no shit, right?
Right.
It's late, and I'm tired.
Yeah, so I'm on Pacific. I'm aligned to Pacific time now, so you're Central time?
I'm 2 hours ahead of you right now.
Oh, geez, dude. Well, let's lickety-split knock this shit out and give the listeners something, and I don't know, move on.
We'll figure it out.
So... no cool stories, just Cass and I both in a kind of a shitty mood tonight. So you get what you get and you get what you pay for. So fuck off. And here we go. We're going to talk about personal accountability tonight. And here we go.
Yeah, we're talking about debrief, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did the goal setting episode a while back, and this kind of dovetails nicely with that one to kind of put a little bit on the back end of it, so to speak. So after you set your goal and you come up with your plan and then you go and execute it, and at some point you got to debrief it, right? That's right. You got to find out, did it work? Yes or no? How was my plan? How was my execution? Did I meet my goal? And that's kind of where it left us with today for today's episode. So I'm sure that you have a long list of notes. I probably had some at some point, but the hurricane that just hit my desk, I don't even know where my fucking keyboard is to my computer right now. It's gone somewhere. It's under a pile of something. So notes be damned. Let's hit it and quit it.
Yeah. So I would just say up front, I think you and I were fortunate because growing up in the fighter community, right? Like, dude, we debriefed every sortie. And when we first started, everybody kind of had their own techniques, but at some point we kind of set a standard for how debrief should go and what were the things that we were going to look at that came down from the weapons school that kind of standardized things across the board. So you and I have had to do this a lot in our life, and it's something that I think, most people don't really ever have to do, maybe outside of, talking about, an after action report for, the job they're in or something like that. So I did do a little research though, and I was just going to share, this is why debriefing is important. It's important for a bunch of reasons, but some statistical data, according to a study conducted by Harvard Business School, debrief can improve performance by up to 20%. And it found that teams who debriefed regularly were 25% more effective than those who did not. And then additionally, a study published in the Journal of Applied Psychology found that proper debriefing can increase learning by 30%, right? So what's the point? The point of a good debrief, dude, and the point of, good evaluation of a goal or something like that in that personal debrief process is it really lets you get down to what's the overall lesson learned, right? What were the root causes that contributed to, my success or failure? Not all of those things are necessarily going to be what leads to the lesson learned, but they're going to give you some indicators and some clues. But it makes you the importance about this process is it makes you get specific. And it makes you get a little more granular than just I wanted to lose 10 pounds, but I didn't change my diet, right? Well, that may be the lesson learned for sure, but there might be other things that are embedded in that led to you not changing your diet. So it makes you get down to a more granular level to really get to the root cause of what those things are that lead to the overarching lessons learned. So
yeah, I think there's a little more depth to it. I mean, the stuff that you read that's all really good stuff. But as you were talking, one of the first things that came to mind is debriefing regularly. Yeah, okay, the practice of sitting down and going through the motions, that's one thing. But you have to actually be honest and hold you have to be accountable. You have to debrief for accountability.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of the key point is, I mean, you can go through the motions of this, but if you're not going to be honest, and this goes to yourself, this goes to a program or a process that you're trying to run or whatever, you know, and what you were describing, the way that you and I were kind of, I mean, we just got beat up with it, but what we got was a ton of fucking reps at it.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this over and over and over on the podcast, is if you want to get good at something, you got to do it a lot, you know, give it 10,000 reps. And you and I were fortunate enough to have gotten those 10,000 reps, but each one of those debriefs, it wasn't just lip service. It was, hey man, we're going to spend some time here and we're going to get down into the nuts and bolts of this. And you know what, Cass, I briefed you that I wanted you to fly a 25-degree wire on this strafe pass, and you flew 27 degrees. So here's how you fix that. And, you know, in the grand scheme, is two degrees going to make it or break it? No, probably not. But we briefed to a standard, and we're going to hold each other to that standard.
Yeah. Well, and that's the important piece, is the accountability piece, right? And I think what you were saying, just to kind of piggyback on what you were just saying, is what gets lost in this sometimes, especially when you're doing it for yourself. It's not a team environment, this, that, or the other, is that being self-accountable, that self-inspection piece, right? That's difficult. And some people can't be honest with themselves or don't want to be honest about, you know, maybe why they came up short. But the bottom line is it involves, you know, kind of a thoughtful reflection on your activities, your experience, your performance, all of those types of things, and what the outcomes of those actions were. What were the choices that you made? Were those choices good or bad? Did they support what you were trying to achieve, or did they not? And if you can really be honest with yourself about that, then you'll get a really good picture of what led to kind of your overall performance in either, you know, attaining or maybe coming up short of whatever goal you set for yourself. But the other part of it too is I think it allows you to. So here's one thing I want to stress, and I want to stress this up front, because I used to do this a lot in debriefs with guys that were struggling, was it also gives you an opportunity to pinpoint what may be your strengths. So you may have come up short on a goal, but as you go through this debrief process, you may go, hey man, here's some things that I really did well. And then you can kind of go, well, why did those things go well for me? Well, because, you know, I had the right attitude about it, or I was very disciplined in it, or what, right? And those things can then be kind of become transferable to maybe some of the things that you're lacking in. So when you go through this process as well, try to look at what your strengths were in whatever you're debriefing yourself to, and try to pick out, you know, 2 or 3 things that you did well in that process, and then build on those the next time, because I think that will help you not just identify areas of weakness and areas that you may need to improve, but also where you did well.
Yeah. No, that's important, man. And I tend to focus on the things that I screwed up. And this is, you know, just using myself as an example. And maybe it's because I have those reps and I kind of know a lot of my strengths and weaknesses, just having gone through some of these processes already. But if you're new to it, you know, what you said has a lot of validity to it. I tend to focus more on the not so great things and the things that didn't work, and try to improve on those. Now, granted, I've been doing this for a little while, but one of the things, you know, as you were talking, I was thinking about, we've said before, we talk about the difference between being results focused versus process focused. When you're doing a debrief, oftentimes you have to start with the result. And that seems counterintuitive, almost counterintuitive to what we have regularly said about don't be results focused. But in order to debrief properly, you have to see the result and just quantify it and qualify it and write that shit down. And then you work from that backwards and go, how did we get here? You know, like how many times in a DCA mission out there, you know, you're like 25 minutes into the fight and one of the strikers gets through and bombs the BX or bombs Cass's mom's house. All right. Well, that didn't happen in the 25th minute. Most of the time that happened in like somewhere between minute 8 and 10. When
it was a
you
weapon
failed to
issue, a flow decision.
Exactly. You didn't make the right flow decision, or your turn hot was the wrong direction, or your radar mech was bad, or something like that. You know, you weren't in a position 15 minutes ago that led to that striker getting through. So that's why I say, while we do preach, don't be results focused versus being, we encourage you to be process focused. At the same time, when you're debriefing,
process, not the outcome.
When you're debriefing, you start with the result. Did it work? Yes or no? And if no, you go back and you find out why.
Yeah, but some of it goes back to what you said on a couple of different podcasts too, which was, if your goal was to lose 10 pounds so that you look good at the high school reunion and you only lost 8, well, yeah, you came up short on the goal, but there's probably some things
Yeah.
that you really did well in that process to lose 8 pounds, right? And that can be built upon. So that
Yeah.
was all I was
No,
trying to get at when we
no,
talked,
100%
when I
valid,
was making
man.
my previous comment.
Yeah, 100% valid. Love it. And I think too often, especially those of us who are like super critical on ourselves, we lose sight of that a lot of times, and that can maybe cause you a little bit of depression or put you in a funk when in reality it's a huge win.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and the other thing that I want to stress about the importance of this process too, because I think if we're honest with ourselves, outside of you and I being in the environment we grew up in, I don't know if I would have learned this stuff or done this stuff on a regular basis. But when you do this with yourself, when you force yourself to kind of debrief your actions, the outcomes, all of that stuff, and how you showed up in the process, it's it perpetuates learning, right?
Yeah.
It perpetuates growth and a continuous learning process that you get to understand more and more about where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. And I don't think
Yeah.
that most people really do that on a regular basis. I think we all just kind of make some assumptions, maybe good, maybe bad, maybe true, maybe false, about
Hmm.
what we're good at, what we're not good at, and we never really take the time to kind of go through this process. So that's why it can be important as well.
Yeah, that's huge, man. And we've done I think we've talked about the things that are quantifiable. It seems to be a little bit easier on that, but if you're walking out of your room at the end of the night, getting ready to go to bed, and you're flicking off the lights, and you ask yourself, "Was I a good dude today?" How measurable is that? It's very
Well,
subjective, and that's going to come back to your value system, and that's going to be that's almost going to be your grading rubric. Is did I do the things that I associate with the values that I hold, and did I transfer those into behaviors throughout my day to day? And so that's a way that you can grade something that's maybe somewhat not as tangible as did I lose the
yeah.
10 pounds in 90
Well,
days?
exactly. What you're getting at is quantitative versus qualitative, right? So
Yeah.
quantitative are those things that we can measure with facts, numbers, statistics, whatever. But then there's qualitative aspects of things too. Like you're talking about, did I show up in my values? There's a lot of qualitative aspects to leadership, and just kind of how you show up in the world or in relationships and things like that. So that's a good distinction to make between the quantitative and qualitative.
Yeah, look at the big brain on Brad over here that knows all the definitions and shit.
Look at you.
So yeah, I mean, well, that's a good point when you're talking about the leadership stuff, because oftentimes, it's easy to, when you're in a leadership position, it's easy to measure the metrics side of it, but it's much harder to measure the emotional side or the personal side of it.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
do my people like what I'm doing? Or, I mean, that's even probably a bad question to ask if you're a
That
leader,
is.
but I mean, you see where I'm getting at. It's hard for me. Words are hard, especially, and I'm a little bit fired up right now. So
Yeah, well, but no, I mean, a good example of that would be, like for instance, when I was in command, the first couple months, it's you're trying to fill everybody out a little bit, so to speak. You're trying to get a sense of the direction that the squadron needs to move in, where everybody's at relatively from, just a knowledge and a skill set perspective. Where the weak areas are in the squadron, and not just in the flying side, but whether that's support, maintenance, what are the things that we need to be able to do our jobs well. But then, at a certain point in time, you have to turn around too and kind of look behind you and go, hey, man, are they buying the message? Or, are
yeah,
people buying into the shit I'm saying? And there may not be a great way to measure that, but you know,
yeah,
you know if people are on board or not, because you can tell it by
yeah.
their actions or how they respond to you, or the direction that the squadron's moving in, things like that. So those are kind of some of those qualitative aspects of it. But
That's so much more articulately said than what I was trying to get out. I know what I want to say a lot of times. I just don't know the
uh,
words to say them.
I knew where
Yeah.
you were going with it.
Yeah. Well, having a hard time focusing. I'm kind of going through a little bit of that right now with Caleb. He's home for spring break, and we're having some real discussions about what his future may hold. And we sat down last night in the living room, and we were just kind of kicking some things around. And I told him all the stuff that we say on the podcast, and it's, dude, if you want great things, you got to do great things. I mean,
Yeah.
you got to get out there and you got to work hard at some of this stuff. And
Yeah.
right now, I think he's coasting a little bit. But guess what? He's going to get a grade sheet eventually. That's gonna it's gonna. I mean, his rubric is laid out in front of him. At the end of the semester, he's going to get a GPA for this semester, and that's going to go in his record. His ROTC is going to write a review on him, a personal performance review, and that's going to go in his record. So what I told him was a lot the same message that we've talked about, and you especially have talked about it, is, dude, you don't want to get to the end of 4 years and go, man, I didn't get that pilot slot that I wanted. I could have probably worked a little bit harder that freshman semester.
Yeah.
You know, that having to live with that piece of it, to me, would just be, that'd be really difficult, versus knowing that I left it all on the field and I didn't get chosen. I could probably get over that a lot quicker. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great distinction.
Well, but how do you get there though? And it's, man, you got to look at yourself in the mirror right now and do some debrief.
Yeah.
You got to take stock of where you are right now. And we talked about this in the goal setting. In order to set a proper goal, you have to start with where you are. You have to know where you are to begin with before you can get to the end. And that's kind of where I'm going with him, is we're halfway through freshman 2. Let's sit down and figure out exactly where you are. And then we'll figure out a plan to move forward from that.
Yeah. And it could be, sometimes it can be relatively small changes that affect that outcome. There may be just a few things that he needs to tinker here or there to increase his performance, but you're never going to figure that stuff out unless you take the time to sit down and kind of walk through that debrief process.
Well, I think in a case like that, in this case very specifically, and I bet you that a lot of our listeners can look back through their lives and on their timelines, and they can find some places where, dude, it just takes a little more effort. That's really it. It's not anything necessarily that you're doing bad. You're just not giving it 100%. And if you do the work, then good things happen. If you slough off and do the minimum, then I mean, you just might not be above the cut line when they go make it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the nice thing about I think doing like a regular debrief process with yourself too is it brings a level of intentionality too, right? Because I think it's easy for all of us to get into ruts sometimes where we get into a coast mode, right? Because you feel like you're doing pretty good. You feel like you got everything kind of licked. Things are repetitive. The days are repetitive. The job is repetitive. The work is repetitive. And you kind of just get into this coast mode. But if you're debriefing yourself to some of these aspects of your life and you're being intentional about it, you'll start to find places where improvement can be made, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And that keeps you from getting into that coast mode a little bit.
Well, and that brings up a good point though, is we've been talking a lot about what I would say the why behind debriefing. Let's talk about the how a little bit. Like, how do we actually do this? In our world, we had a pretty rote, I had a debriefing guide that went down a script: plan, products, brief, execution. That was it. Admin, tech, admin, and then execution. And under the execution was game plan and individual. And those were the areas that I was looking to improve for the next iteration. So if I'm trying to debrief something, a goal that I set in my personal life, could I follow something similar?
Absolutely. So like, tell me, with what you grew up doing and what we did in the fighter squadron, if I've got a goal that I've set for myself personally, and I've come to kind of whatever the timeline was that I gave myself to reach that goal, I'm there. And now it's time for me to be a little introspective and debrief that for myself a little bit. How do I even figure out what that lesson learned is? Like, where do I start? What would you say?
Well, and this is just me kind of making shit up as I go. I think I would go back to the SMART model and make sure that the goal was a good goal to begin with. And that will kind of lead me into the plan and then how I laid things out from there. So start with what I actually set. Was that realistic? Was it good? Was it actually attainable in the time frame that I allotted to it? Because maybe it wasn't. Maybe you realize that fucking life happens and you can't train for a marathon in 2 months.
Yeah, maybe it was really ambitious.
Yeah, and we want people to set audacious goals, but sometimes you might bite off more than you can chew, and that's okay. Next time you plan it out, give yourself a little more time or dial it back just as notch.
Yeah, and it's great that you said that, Roscoe, because when we used to debrief, one of the first questions that you would ask yourself was the game plan valid? Right?
Yeah,
that's the first question you ask, and you're basically saying the same thing. Was my goal valid? Like,
Well,
did
and
I
when you asked
go
that
ahead?
question, you were standing by the whiteboard and you pointed to your number one objective. And when you asked that question, it was to answer, did we meet the task? Yes or no?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
did we defend Cass's mom's house for the 25 minutes we said we were going to defend it for? Yes or no? If the answer is no, let's take a look at the game plan first.
Yeah.
Was it survivable? Was it tenable? Did we have enough missiles going out the door? Did we have enough gas to last for 25 minutes? You flew Vipers,
Right.
so probably not. But you know what I'm
Easy.
saying. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's it, right? So, and maybe it was valid. Maybe you did set a realistic and attainable and timely goal. So the next question that you have to ask yourself was, did you execute your game plan?
Yes. True.
You know, did you execute the game plan correctly?
Did number 4 run around in Afterburner the entire time and run himself out of gas and take
Yeah.
3 missiles home with him?
Right.
You know, that's the level of detail that I want to get down into.
Yeah. So let's take that back to, you know, an example of maybe I wanted to let's take it back to the example you like to you like to use of losing 10 pounds, right? In 3
Okay.
months or whatever.
Okay.
So was that realistic? Let's say we say, yeah, you know, that was a realistic game plan. Okay, well,
I
what
I would go back to the SMART model and I would say, do I have 10 pounds to lose? Some people can't. If you are a slim 120-pound female marathon runner,
lose 10
you're
pounds.
probably not going to lose 20 pounds or 10 pounds in 90 days. Me, I could probably lose 10 pounds in 90 days.
Yeah. So let's say your answer is yes. You know, the game plan was valid. Now it's, did I execute it? So what were the benchmarks that you set? What were the milestones that you set in that 3-month time frame to achieve that?
Well, I was going to go to the gym 4 days a week. I was going to increase my cardio and you know, I was going to try to get 30 minutes of cardio and 30 minutes of anaerobic exercise 3 to 4 times a week.
Yeah. And maybe there was some diet stuff in there too, right? Like maybe I was or maybe there wasn't. So maybe, hey, man, maybe I went to the gym and I did those things, but the piece that was missing out of all of that was you cannot exercise a bad diet.
That's
and
right.
The fact that I was still eating nachos and Cheez-Its and M&Ms every night prevented me from losing that extra 3 pounds, right?
Cass, so I like fried chicken, man. That's why I got a little bit of fluff on the side. You know what I'm saying? I can still run 5 miles without stopping, but I like fried chicken. But
that's understandable, brother.
Yeah.
But but this is how we can start to break that stuff down. So I think the biggest thing that you have to do is, like, when you have a goal that you've set and you put that on a whiteboard and now you're at the end of that time, was the goal valid, right? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, then was the game plan that I executed valid? And what you want to do in this process is you just want to write anything you can think of, even if you think it's stupid, anything you can think of. You know, I took the elevator at work instead of walking up the stairs. Write it down, man.
Oh, yeah.
List all of those things, right? Because they're all, to a certain extent, what we would call in the fine art community contributing factors.
Yep.
Now, not all of those contributing factors are going to necessarily tie into what the overarching lesson learned is, or what the kind of the big takeaway is going to be. But the nice thing about doing that and getting very granular in that process is, with every contributing factor, you'll have what we would call an instructional fix, right? So this contributing factor may have not been a big, you know, maybe walking the stairs instead of taking the elevator wasn't why I didn't achieve my goal or wasn't part of that overarching lesson learned. But I just identified a weakness. Yep. And when I go do this next time, I'm going to take the fucking stairs every day.
Take the stairs, yeah.
You know, instead of riding the elevator, right? So that's how you can get down to kind of that granular level and really distill out and find maybe some of those weak spots.
Yeah, this is, you know, we'll go right back to the goal setting just for a second. And this is the importance of writing your things down. Write your goal down, write your plan down, because when you come back to debrief, you can go back to that and it's written down in front of you. And you can really, I mean, literally just go line by line. Did I buy new shoes? I said I was going to buy new shoes, but did I buy new shoes? So when I ran, was I comfortable enough to complete my 3 or 4 mile runs or whatever it is, you know? And you can break this down and get down into the details of it based on what you've already written down. It's a good starting point anyways.
Yeah. And the nice thing about listing out all those potential contributing factors too is it may highlight obstacles that you didn't identify when you first started this. You know, it may let you highlight things that were obstacles and you're achieving
Mhm.
whatever that goal was that you didn't recognize were going to be there when you
Yeah.
started this. Maybe a bad habit was something, or you got to have your chai tea pumpkin spice latte twice a day or whatever, right? Who knows?
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
But then also by identifying what those unforeseen obstacles may have been, it gives you the opportunity to build strategies around how you can overcome those obstacles
Yeah.
on the next round, right? Does that make sense?
No, it does. And a real quick example here, in just in the last couple of weeks, I'm mentoring two or three people through the 75 hard program right now. Three people have seen Katie and I doing it, and they wanted to jump on board. And we had some very real discussions with them up front, like, hey man, like, you kind of have to think this through. You have to plan it out a little bit. And if you do, then it's really not that bad. But if you don't take the time to think it out and plan it out some, then you can hit some hurdles. And sure enough, within 10 or 14 days, one of the guys, he fell off the wagon because he failed to plan his day out. And, one of the requirements to the 75 hard program is 2 workouts. One of them has to be outside. Well, his normal daily battle rhythm was get up and go for a walk, or sorry, go to the gym in the morning and then go for a walk around the neighborhood in the evening. Well, it happened that evening, big thunderstorms rolled into town, and he didn't get up and check the weather that day, so he didn't have an idea of what it was going to be, and it kind of caught him off guard, and he wasn't able to get that outside workout. Turns out he probably could have. He could have thought outside the box a little bit more, and that was a little bit of a coaching point from me to him was, hey man, get creative, go on your back porch and, I don't know, do push-ups or something for 45 minutes. You can do this. It doesn't have to be a walk. But his weakness, to use your term, was his aperture wasn't wide enough. He didn't have the situational awareness enough to know where he could maybe modify some of these things. And I would encourage people, if you're trying to set an audacious goal and then execute that, ask people, talk to people who've done it before. Like, I want to write a book. Let's talk to some authors and find out what their writing method is. How do you brainstorm? How do you write your outlines? How do you put together these characters? Or if you want to make a podcast, what was the first thing we did? We called a bunch of motherfuckers that ran podcasts and started asking questions.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, right? That's like what we were just talking about. It's kind of an unforeseen obstacle that he was going to encounter that he never had thought of. And when he was confronted with it, he didn't know what to do about it, right? And so that's
well, think about it. Think about a young Weeman out there in a very complex mission, and he is faced with a tactical problem that he's maybe never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
Do you expect him to necessarily have the SA to be able to make a smart audible on that? I mean, he's got to move the jet somewhere.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's got a 50-50 shot, man. It's really a coin flip at that point, So that comes with time and experience and trying this stuff over and over again.
Well, and that's a great point, because that's what this is about too, right? This is a learning process. This is how we learn and identify what we need to change, or what we need to work on, or what our strengths are, or where our weaknesses are, or, hey man, my aperture wasn't wide enough to kind of think outside the container on these things. So like, that's the point of all of this. It's to teach you those things about yourself so that you can be aware of them. So the next time that comes up, you go, oh, last time this happened, I didn't think outside the box, and I wasn't thinking about ways that I could still do this, and stay on course.
Yeah.
So what am I going to do different this time? Right. That's what it's all about.
Well, in that, I would transition. I would say, you talked about contributing factors, and the contributing factor was the weather in this guy's case. And his the root cause of him not being able to complete his goal for the day or for the challenge may have been, man, I needed to ask more questions, or I needed to open my aperture. I needed to think outside the box. I needed to call my dad and say, hey man, have you ever had this happen in your life? Or call your mentor, or talk to a bro and find out maybe a different way to crack this nut. Maybe that's your overall lesson learned right there is, hey man, don't be afraid to ask people questions.
Yeah, it could be. And that's how, go ahead.
No, I mean, really, the train came off the tracks when he didn't check the weather the night before. And he didn't have a backup plan in his hip pocket to be able to pull out, which is fine. If you've never experienced that before, it's kind of hard to foresee some of these. We call them unforeseen obstacles for a reason. They're unforeseen. Now, with enough experience in SA, oftentimes you can wiggle your way through them. But if you've never been faced with that before, okay, great. But, you know, if you're sitting there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, thunderstorms roll in and you can't go get your workout in, like, start thinking about, I mean, is there a way that I can do this? Let me call somebody and see if they've ever, I mean, I just went last week. I went jogging in the rain. Sometimes you have to do shit like that.
Yeah. Or drive 20 minutes away outside the thunderstorm to a park and do your thing there. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to attack that problem, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's a great way to debrief it. And so I just want to go back to what you said, though, because we hadn't really talked about root cause. So what you guys want to do is, what's the overarching goal? List all the contributing factors and spend some time on that, right? Like, get granular. And like I said, nothing's wrong to list. Anything that you think may have been something that, because you can see as we go through this thought exercise, even now, just talking about this cat on 75 hard, right? It may, the weather's a big factor, but it's also, you know, oh, I could have reached out to a friend, or I could have reached out to Roscoe and said, hey man, the weather sucks and I need to do my workout. What do I do? Right. Or so there's all these other pieces to it. Right. But what you'll see is you list out all these contributing factors on a sheet of paper, on a whiteboard, whatever you use. You'll start to be able to go through them and you'll see some themes, and you can pick out, there's usually kind of one big overarching contributing factor, or maybe two or three combined together that are the root cause of why you weren't able to achieve whatever that goal was. And those are the things that you want to get down and drill down on, you know? And then it's just, it gives you, the good part about that is it gives you clarity about how to attack it better the next time. Still with me? Did I lose you? No. Okay.
No, somehow I inadvertently muted my microphone. That's
okay.
Great. So awesome. The listeners, they missed like the greatest segment of the Be One Change One podcast ever in the history of podcasts, because my mic was muted. So I can't remember exactly what I said. I kind of blacked out for a minute. So I will just say that's why it's important to write this shit down, right? Yeah. And it starts with writing down your goal. It continues into writing down your plans. And then when you do this debrief process, no kidding, get out a piece of paper and write this shit down, because one of those things that you write down on that piece of paper, you're probably going to circle and highlight, and that's going to be your big takeaway from this.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and guess what? Sometimes if everything goes well and you achieve the goal, then the overarching lesson learned are the things that you did well, right? And the things that you can apply to achieve something similar the next time, or things that you can apply, strengths that you have to a future goal that you set for yourself. It doesn't always have to be wrapped around failure. Although, you know, failure, like we've talked about on the podcast, is one of our best teachers, and that's going to give you the best opportunity for learning in that growth process, especially if you're new to kind of doing this whole debrief thing. So
yeah, I would, and you know, on that line, I would say probably start small. Don't, you know, don't dive right in and try to debrief why my life is a failure. You know, let's start kind of easy and be like, hey, why was I late for work this morning? Yeah. And, you know, maybe you can back that up a little bit better. And some of those little things that you don't think about, that's, you know, as it comes to me, that's a little bit of a pretty easy example for somebody to maybe practice on is, you know, how can I cut 5 minutes off my commute or my morning routine, something like that, you know? And I think that we have just gotten so used to it over the years that we probably just don't even think about it, but we kind of go through this on a daily basis. Yeah. You know, like, oh man, today it took me 31 minutes to get to work, where normally it takes me 28 minutes to get to work. Why? I need to find out why that happened. Well, there was a wreck on the highway, or, you know, whatever it was, dog shit in the hallway and I had to pick it up or something.
Yeah, well, that's a great point though, Roscoe, because you can apply this to so many aspects. It doesn't just have to be tied to like a really big goal that you're going after. Although we're talking about it specifically today about how to debrief that goal process. But you're absolutely right. Like, dude, maybe one of your goals is to lose some weight, but you can't get your ass out of bed in the morning, and the only opportunity that you have to work out is before work. So how do we get there? Right? Like, what are the things that you can do to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning so that you can go to the gym for an hour, get home, shower, shave, shit, and then get to work on time? You know, well, that may be. Go ahead.
No, I'm right there with you. I talked to a dude the other day that he was complaining about not having enough time in his day to get some things done. And we just broke down one of his days. We went through that exercise of you break down a day, you break down a week, and let's find the gaps, man. And we found out that he had 7.5 hours a day that he was just fucking off.
Yeah.
Well, guess what, man? I mean,
Yeah.
you can do a lot in 7.5 hours,
That's
bro.
right.
You can get a lot of shit
go to
done,
school,
man. So
you could work out. There's all kinds of stuff you can do.
we can definitely fill that void.
Yeah, and we make fun of it, but but a lot of times that's what it comes down to, right? Shifting priorities, especially I think for some of our younger listeners, because they've grown up with cell phones in their hands and iPads, and they're so tied to social media. And like, dude, if you're spending an hour and a half every night on Instagram or Threads or X or whatever, like looking at comments and laughing and giggling about shit, you need to knock that off. Like, you've got better things to do with that time in your life that are going to be way more productive and serve you much better, especially if you're struggling in any specific area in your life. So
I benefited twice from going through a basic training program. I went through BMT and then I went through OTS, and I can confidently say that the one thing that those two programs taught me the most, like one of the most valuable things that those two programs taught me, was how long 1 minute is. And, you think about 1 minute is not being, it's just not really that long on the cosmic timeline, but dude, you can do a lot in 1 minute. You can get a lot of stuff done in 1 minute. If you have 5 minutes available in your day, dude, you could read 4 or 5 pages of a book in 5 minutes. There's a lot. You can go do burpees for 5 minutes and let me know how you feel. Just straight burpees for 5 minutes. There's a lot you can get done.
Time.
So it suddenly becomes. There was a movie called Deep Blue Sea back in the day. It was a really terrible movie, but LL Cool J was in it, and he had this one line. He was talking about the theory of relativity. He says, you put your hands in a hot skillet for 1 minute, or 1 minute can seem like an eternity. You get your hands on a hot chick, and an eternity can seem like 1 minute. That's the theory of relativity.
Yeah, so no doubt. That's pretty good.
That's kind of what I'm talking about, man. It's like 1 minute, 5 minutes. If you have a 10-minute break in your day where you don't have anything planned, dude, you can get some stuff done. You can be productive in here. And this is all just building blocks and pile-ons to making yourself a little bit better and pushing that ball a little bit further down the field.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, man.
Well, so when you go back to debrief your goal, whatever it was, maybe it was the lose 10 pounds in 90 days goal. And you had on your calendar, you look at your calendar and you see a few red X's on there where you just didn't get to the gym that day, or you didn't get your workout in that day. Well, debrief that day, go down and break that thing down and find those little 10 or 15 minute chunks of time. And you probably could have gotten something out of it. Something is better than nothing. And then when you get to the end of it and you debrief it, if you filled all that time in and you still didn't make it, you can find something else, like you said, your diet or whatnot. But that's how granular you can get down on this debrief process.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can even go like from an exercise perspective. If you're trying to increase your cardio, let's say, but you spend the first 6 weeks on the treadmill at the same speed for the same amount of time, you're not doing yourself any favors. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so those are the things that you have to look at. Yeah, like you were saying, you have to find ways to push yourself and to challenge yourself to get outside of what's comfortable in that moment, to make things a little bit harder than maybe they need to be if you want to see the improvement, especially when it comes to physical fitness. But
well, on that example, I would go back and I would say you probably didn't do decent enough planning, because had you done decent enough planning, you would have read things that say maybe you want to do some HIIT workouts, or
do some HIIT.
You don't want to
do some intervals.
It's kind of scientifically proven that you don't want to do just steady state cardio every single day. You know, it's great for your heart, but it really doesn't do anything for your ass. And if you're losing your ass is your goal, then you want to do some different stuff like interval training or HIIT workouts or something like that.
Yeah, you got to mix it up with intervals, HIIT, and endurance. It's got to be a mix of all three.
Yeah. So that goes back to the plan, and now your plan was flawed. You change your plan, you try again. That's the comma and on the back end of that debrief.
Yeah. I wanted to talk for a second though about, debriefing points that are failures though, because we talk about failure a lot on the podcast, and I think that it's easy and that society in general views failure through a very negative lens. But dude, like we've said before, right? That can be some of your most valuable insights and lessons learned is when you fail, right?
Yeah, for
Because you
sure.
have to get to the nitty gritty and the truth about, where you came up short and maybe what you are good at and what you're not good at and what are the areas that you need to improve on. So I've got a couple of notes here I just want to go through real quick. And that's the first one is, when we debrief failure and we get to the granular root causes, contributing factors, root causes, and the overarching lessons learned, dude, that's a guide. Like we were talking about before, that serves as a guide that can help you avoid making the same mistake in the future. If you don't debrief yourself to these things, the chance of you repeating the error is pretty fucking high.
Yeah,
and you may not see different results the next time you try it again.
Yeah, and I would say that if you're not debriefing down to that level of detail, then you're not holding a high enough standard in your processes either. And that's going to be a reflection on you and your values. If you're, well, like the example that I was using with Caleb the other night, dude, if you're not leaving it all on the field, then that's a reflection on you and your level of effort that you're putting out there. So maybe that's part of your debrief. You know, so when we debriefed, we always had a standard that we debriefed to, and that was we debriefed down to perfection. We wanted it to be perfectly as we briefed it. If I said fly 450 knots and you flew 451, you were wrong. Let's fix that.
Yeah.
Here's your next throttle position. Here's how you can ease off some of the G or whatever it is, and that's where we would debrief to it. Do we expect perfection? Not necessarily. I expect excellence. And I used to tell my football players this, man, I aim for perfection, but accept excellence. If you try to make 100 on every test, but you made a 98 on a couple of them, that's still pretty fucking good, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you're teaching attention to detail through that process too, which is
that's
kind of, I think, the point that we were often driving after, was stressing that importance of attention to detail in every aspect of what you're doing, to try to strive towards that perfection.
Well, maybe it was a cross-check issue. Maybe it was a,
who knows?
I can't walk and chew gum at the same time kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people did you see when they got to BFM? They nailed the TR phase, they nailed the AHC phase, and then they get to BFM, and it turns out they can't pull G and talk on the radio at the same time.
Yeah.
So, and it just takes reps, takes practice, takes debriefing down to the details, and this is a standard. If you don't meet the standard, you're going to bust the ride and do it again.
Yep, that's it. The next thing I had down was, guide was the first one. The next one is understanding. So like we've talked about before, if you can understand your failures and why they happen, then you can actually learn how to turn those things into opportunities for improvement and personal growth, right? You can start to drill down on the areas that you may have weaknesses in that you need to enhance into a strength somehow. And you can get really specific about how to do that. Perspective. It gives you perspective too, right? Because, dude, you and I busted plenty of rides throughout our course in the Air Force. Or
did you ever see 4X's on a grade sheet?
I never saw 4X's on a grade sheet, but
all right, I win.
But even not just busting a ride, you every once in a while you go out there and you just have a down day, and you don't perform well, you don't make the right call, you're just not in the zone, whatever the case may be. What I want to stress here is failure. When you fail, if you're striving valiantly, like we talk about by being in the arena, if you're striving valiantly, you're going to come up short every once in a while, right?
Yeah.
Failure is not a reflection of your self-worth.
Yes.
Okay. It's just an opportunity to learn and grow. It's just an opportunity to learn and improve the next time. That's it. And I think that's one of the other things that we learned in the fighter squadron too, because the debriefs are harsh and you got to have some thick skin, but you can't take it personal because we're not there to, nobody's berating you because you're a bad person. They're berating you because you flew poorly that day, and we can't accept that because when we go to war and you fly poorly, you die and other people die, and that's not acceptable, right? So it's not. I think it's important to stress that when you fail at something, especially if you're really striving for things, it's going to happen, and it's not a reflection of who you are necessarily or your own self-worth. It's just an opportunity to reflect and learn and grow.
I think this is a really good one, man. We talked about this when we had Fifi on, and failure is an opportunity to grow and learn. That's true. That's not to say that it's not disappointing. And
sure,
you can be disappointed in your performance, in yourself, and how you acted or how you didn't act, or what you brought to the team or whatever it is. You can be disappointed in that. But if you wallow in that and you have shame around it and you have self-pity and the poor me's, then that's a barrier to the learning piece of it. So shake that off a little bit. And I've gotten on to kids in debriefs before for sitting there with that long pouty face. I'm like, dude, come on, man. You got to snap out of this and engage, because you're not going to get out of this what I intend for you, what I need you to get out of this.
That's right.
So that you can win tomorrow. Because guess what? And this is what Fifi said that I loved is, yeah, you're going to fail and you're going to fuck shit up, man. But you're going to go do it again tomorrow.
That's right.
Right? You're going to get another chance to win tomorrow. And you might fuck that up, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And we're going to keep giving you chances until the DO comes in and says, guess what, dude? You need to go fly fatties for a little while.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you got to dust yourself off and just keep trying, man.
Yeah.
And I know that's easy to say and much more difficult to do. But if you remember that it's not a reflection of your self-worth, it's just an opportunity. It's just an opportunity to learn from the situation and find a way to improve yourself. That's all it is every time. Yeah, that's it.
What I would hope that people are doing is, let's say that you're studying for a big exam or something. You're a college kid or you're taking some kind of certification from work or for work or whatever it is. And you study, and you think you're doing the right things. And then you go in there and you bomb the test. Well, I mean, does that mean that you're a complete fucking failure and you don't deserve this job or this opportunity? No, not necessarily. Maybe you just weren't studying the right things. Maybe you're not a good test taker. Maybe you misread some of the questions. Maybe you had dated information. It could be any number of things. And until you go back and debrief that and your process, the result, you failed the test. All right, well, let's figure out maybe why. It's not that I'm a shitty person and I don't deserve to be here. Maybe it was, dude, somebody gave me a book that was 3 years old and the information's been updated. It could be something that simple, man. You get the updated information. Maybe you just needed a couple of reps to do it. Maybe you're a hard learner or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it was funny. I was flying with a captain today who is relatively new, and he'd just gone through upgrade a few months ago. And we were talking about upgrade process and stuff like that, like what the upgrade was like. And he was telling me they have, an oral piece to the check ride. And he's like, when they gave us, when we were getting ready for our check rides and the orals, he's like, they gave us 2 packets. And one was the flight operations manual packet that had about 500 questions in it. And one of them was systems. And when we go in every year for our check rides, it's usually more systems focused than it is flight ops manual focused. So he goes, so I went with systems, man, and I studied the systems hard. And he got in there, and guess what? It wasn't systems, man. It was flight ops manual. Yeah. And he was going, oh, I made the wrong choice. So
yeah,
it happens.
No, I have a very
but
similar
that doesn't
story.
Make him a shitty pilot or a stupid person,
No.
He just
chose
focused on the wrong thing. Yeah.
I bet you next time he studies a little bit of both. See, lesson learned. So I have a story similar. Back when I was an enlisted guy, on the enlisted side, we have to test for our promotions every year. The weighted airman performance system, I think it was called. And you have to study, or you're tested on your job, like the skill sets that are required to do your job. And then you're tested on big Air Force knowledge, like, rules and regs around how to wear the uniform and how long a chick's hair can be, and the history of the Air Force and who got the first Medal of Honor. And I mean, it covers everything. Drill and ceremony. There's all kinds of stuff. And there's this book called the PFE that you had to, that was your study guide for it, chapters and volumes of these things. And a lot of the crew chiefs that I was running with, we were pretty good at our jobs. So we leaned heavy into the skills piece of it. The job requirements, because it was easy, right? That was all you had to do was really polish some edges and maybe read some stuff that you maybe forgotten about or weren't as you were a little fuzzy on from the years or whatever. And people neglected to study that PFE. Well, when I was studying for tech sergeant, I went heavy on the other side. I figured, okay, I've got enough knowledge in this area to probably get me around a 70 or 75% without studying. So I'm going to lean heavy into this other shit that I don't know. Yeah. And that was the difference in me getting promoted and them not getting promoted, because they closed the gap 10 percentage points and I closed the gap 65 percentage points by
Yeah.
studying the other stuff. So there you go, man. I mean, it really just comes down to what's your plan, what's your process, and what can you learn from it. Those other guys, a lot of them got promoted the next year because they did what I did in that year. They went heavy into the PFE stuff, and they thought, well, I mean, he just put together a pretty good model of how to at least give ourselves a chance.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's great. And it's so true, right? You have to, it always comes back to plan, process, all those things. So,
Yeah.
the last thing I had under the failure piece though was just resiliency, right? So when you go through this process over time, if you're honest with yourself as you go through and you pick apart those pieces and figure out what those contributing factors are, what the root causes are, it's going to build resiliency, right? Because you're going to be able to bounce back. You're going to be a little bit wiser in the process the next time you go through it. You're going to have better outcomes down the road because you've learned and now you know the things that you need to fix, and you're not just stuck in this habitual pattern of lather, rinse, repeat, fail, lather, rinse, repeat, fail, right? Because you're actually learning why things didn't go the way you expected them to the last time you did it. You know, I love the people that sit there and all the time and go, well, I don't understand why this happened. Well, motherfucker, think about it for a second, right? Like, debrief it, you dumbass.
I bet we can find out real quick if we just start asking some questions.
Sure in fucking 10 minutes, if I ask you some questions, I can tell you exactly why the fuck it happened, right? So, yeah.
Well, that's the thing is, something that we learned as instructors was ask a lot of questions and get the person talking and really find out what was going on in his mind, because it could be. I used some examples when I was coaching football, when I was debriefing my kids. I actually had slides put together on how we're going to watch film. Guys, we're not just going to come in here and rewatch the football game. We're going to be looking for some very specific things. And I broke it down debrief style like this. And I said, look, man, we're looking for plan errors. We're looking for execution errors, and we're looking for decision errors. Did you understand the plan? Okay. Maybe you did. Well, did you execute the plan? Well, okay. Well, maybe you did. And then maybe you just made a bad decision.
Yeah.
And we had a couple of plays in this game that I broke down for them just as an example. And we come up to the line of scrimmage and say, okay, quarterback, did you understand that we were running a pass play on this play? Yep. That we know this is a pass play. Okay, cool. Do you know where your routes are? Do you know what your receivers are doing? Does everybody understand the game plan for this play? Yep. Okay, cool. Quarterback and receivers, did you guys see that it was cover 2? Did you understand that was cover 2? And one of the guys says, oh, no, I didn't notice the other safety. He was on the other side of the field. Okay, cool. That might be a contributing factor to why this play's a bust. Quarterback says he saw cover 2. Hey, quarterback, do you understand that when we see cover 2, that means middle of the field or 2 safeties that have deep half in here, and we probably don't want to we don't want to throw the post route against a cover 2 defense. The hole in a cover 2 defense is the corner route. Do you understand that, quarterback? Oh, no, I'd forgotten that. Okay, cool. So now it's a perception error. You didn't understand based on what you saw. You didn't understand what you were supposed to do. Cool, man, I can fix that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. The other side of it is, yeah, dude, yeah, coach, I understand that that we're going to throw the corner route, not the post route on a 2 deep safety. All right, sweet. Did you see the corner route? Yep, saw the corner route. Cool. Did you throw a good ball? Nope. Threw a wobbly duck, corner got it. All right, cool. Execution error, no big deal, right?
Yeah.
Or he makes a decision error and he just throws the ball to the wrong damn guy. So that's how you can kind of break it down. And that's a very rudimentary example, but how you can break down for perception, execution, or decision errors on your game plan. You knew the game plan, or maybe you didn't. And then you break it down into those 3 things. And suddenly, if you ask enough questions, things become a little more tangible.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And I love the, like we talked about before, is the game plan valid? So was my goal valid? Did I execute the game plan that I set out in front of me? The answer probably to that is going to be no to a certain extent, right? And you're going to get a bunch of contributing factors out of that. And if you did execute the game plan correctly, then then we go into those, perception, execution, what were the other errors that could have played part in me not achieving that goal to the extent that I wanted to? So,
I think for the listeners who maybe aren't used to planning things out at that level of detail. And it's one thing to put together a plan. It's quite another to put together a very detailed executable plan. You can have a plan that says, hey, we're going to drive I-8 to San Diego. It's quite another thing to go, okay, I-8 to San Diego. I know I have this many miles. This is my gas mileage. I know how much gas it's going to take to get there. Where are my gas stops? Katie's going to have to pee 69 times on the way there. So get her a funnel and a big mouth bottle and map out the rest stops. That's a detailed plan versus just saying, we're going to take I-8 and go to San Diego.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So practice, right? Get some reps at it, get some reps under your belt, and then sit down. And, the one thing that I was going to pile on to everything that you just listed, and all that stuff was really good, but I was going to say, have some grace and compassion with yourself when you're doing this. And you hit it there at the end when you're talking about, this is not an indictment of your self-worth.
Yeah.
This is just, man, we really want to get the data out of this and so that we can apply it to the next time.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to, right, it's not a reflection of your self-worth, and do be compassionate with yourself around this process, because you're going to come up short in some things, and you've got to have compassion with yourself in the process if you're going to be able to be honest enough with yourself to go, man, this is where I'm really fucking it away, and these are the things that I really need to focus on and fix for the next time.
Because it's a superpower, man.
Yeah, because dude, if you don't want to admit that you have those issues or that you have those problems, then guess what? You're never gonna work on them. And if you never work on them, then fuck you, man. You're just gonna keep doing the same shit over and over again until you do.
That's it. Well, there's a chapter in my book, Work Hard, Don't Suck, that's titled "Your Life is Not going to change until you change your life."
Yep.
And really, man, it's this wheel, this cycle that just goes around of come up with ideas, turn those into plans and goals, execute them, debrief it, and then try again. And it's a circle. And you do that for enough times and you get good at that process. Does that mean that you're going to win everything that you set out to do? No, it doesn't. But you get good at that process and you can learn to do it very quickly and very thoroughly so that the next iteration goes a little bit quicker and a little bit better.
Yeah, and on a bigger scale too, right? Like everything we're talking about, it's just a mindset shift that you guys need to make at the end of the day, away from this idea that, it's also kind of like we talked about with Fifi, when she was talking about they wanted her to go into the instructor upgrade program, right? And she's like, I'm not ready for this. I can't do this. I don't want, and she kept trying to push it off. Yeah, guess what, guys? You may not be ready for this. You may not be ready to go right after the goal that you're setting for yourself, but go fucking do it anyways, right? Because this is a learning process. This isn't a perfection process. This isn't I have to get everything right 100% of the time, all the time. You have to do these things to figure out where you need to fix things. You have to do these things to figure out where you're good at things and where you're not, so that you can start to identify strengths and weaknesses, right? And like Fifi was saying, that her patch comes up to her and it goes, yeah, well, you're not supposed to be ready for the iPug. It's my job to make you ready. It's my job to teach you, right? Well, guess what? We don't live in a world or a society where, unless you just happen to have a really good mentor or a good father or a good friend, where somebody's going to drag you along and teach you these things. So you have to teach them to yourself. And the way you do that is by doing exactly what we're fucking talking about. Set goals, set a game plan, execute the game plan, and then debrief yourself, figure out where it went good, figure out where it went wrong, adjust, fix, pivot, go again.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how you're going to learn.
Yeah.
And that's how you're going to get better. And if you can't do those things, then you're fucked, dude. I'm sorry. Then enjoy life where you're at, because that's where you're going to stay.
Yeah. For the listeners who haven't seen the movie Brittany Runs a Marathon, I highly recommend it. Watch the movie for what it's worth. It is entertaining. It's a very entertaining film, but there's a lot of really, really good themes in that movie. And a lot of it is what we've been talking about for the last 46 minutes. And that is, she set an audacious goal and she failed hard at it. And she was depressed about it. And, she had a support structure, and maybe I would add that into this whole debrief process is, if you do set an audacious goal and you don't make it, which, it's going to happen eventually enough. If you set large enough goals often enough, you're going to come up short on them. I've done it. You've done it. We've all done it. But surrounding yourself with people who can talk you off of that ledge, or give you some more situational awareness, or help you see, maybe some holes in your plan, or ask you some questions around it or something like that. And, accountability partners.
Yep.
Yeah. Accountability partners are hugely helpful, man. If you are new to exercising, or you're new to whatever it is that you're trying to get into, join a club, join a group, go to a spin class, or get with the little ladies in your neighborhood and start going for walks, or whatever it is. And you guys will help hold each other accountable. And that is powerful, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it builds community to a certain extent too. And that's a good way to start to circle people around you that can be that one of five. There can be people that are eligible to be one of those five around you that help you through things. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's a good call.
That's good stuff, man.
Support structure is important. That was a great thing to bring up, brother.
I have a lot of circles of five, based on the different areas that I like to focus on. I have, if I'm talking about writing a book, I have a few trusted agents over there. If I'm talking about, getting more fit, I have some trusted agents over there. If I'm talking about expanding my emotional literacy, or whatever it may be, like I'm using big words that I don't really know what they mean now, but you know what I'm saying? Your church group may be one of your circles. Your friend group on Friday night, video games might be one of your circles, or whatever it is. But
yeah,
having those people who can help hold you accountable. And this is something that I heard a long time ago, man, is if you want to do something, and I use the analogy or the example of running a marathon, because somebody told me this when I was training for a triathlon. They said, dude, one of the best things you can do is tell everyone that you're going to run a triathlon, because they will help hold you accountable. And it won't come in the form of, hey, motherfucker, did you go to the gym today? It'll come in the form of, this is accountability right here. This is someone holding you accountable. Hey, man, how's your training going?
Yeah.
Are you looking forward to that triathlon? And that will make you start thinking about, oh shit, man, I've been kind of slacking off, or I need to do more tempo runs, or I need to get my ass in the pool, or, that's I don't know, passive accountability, I guess, to coin a phrase.
Sure. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, dude. Well, Cass is running out of gas. I'm tired of talking. What else you got, man?
Nothing. I just, to reiterate, be honest with yourself, be compassionate with yourself, break it down, list all the contributing factors, figure out what the overarching ones were that lead to kind of the overarching lesson learned. You can figure out the instructional fixes for the ones that don't directly reflect that root cause, because those are good learning points as well that you can take away. And then, adjust the game plan, pivot, and move out. Try it again, man. That's all. That's all any of us can do.
Lean into your mentors, lean into your support group, ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And God dang it, try fucking hard. Try hard.
Yeah.
Don't half-ass it.
Yeah. Don't leave anything on the table.
Seriously, give it effort. If anything worth doing is worth giving effort to, man. And if you want great things, you got to do hard shit.
Yep.
And so get out there and do hard shit, man. Really give it effort. And then you won't feel bad. You won't feel as bad when you come up a little bit short. If you leave it all in the field, then you can go back and debrief why it didn't work. If you half-ass something, then that's on you, man. So
yeah, it's 100% true.
Lean into your support structure, find your accountability partners, and do hard shit.
Yep. I couldn't agree more.
What else you got, man?
Be the change.
All right, be the one.
Hey guys, one of the consistent topics we discuss on the Be One Change One podcast is the importance of resiliency, seizing opportunities, and choosing courage over comfort to achieve what is important to you. So if you're an outdoorsman, we would encourage you to explore Sick Bear Outdoors.
That's right. Sick Bear believes in using the symbol of resilience to empower your outdoor adventures and to experience the wildness of life's trails. Sick Bear adopts the bear's approach by fearlessly embracing nature, standing your ground, and courageously facing challenges. Get out of your comfort zone at sickbear.com. That's SICBEAR.com. Visit sickbear.com for all of your individual and family hunting, fishing, or outdoor adventure needs. Thanks for flying with the Be One Change One podcast. If you got something out of this show, then be the one and share it in your circles of influence.
You can be our wingman through our website at www.b1change1.com. That's B and the number 1, change and the number 1.com.
We invite you to be the one and join our fighter squadron on social media at B1Change1 on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can follow us at Paul Roscoe White on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as Roscoe's website, www.paulroscoewhite.com.
You can email us from the website and please leave comments, share, and ask questions, or leave ideas of things you would like to discuss on future podcasts. Most importantly, be the one that helps us win the algorithm by leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening on.
Thanks for joining. Until next time, be the one.